Welcome back to Culture Wars. I'm your host, Senpai. Hope you all having a good start to the new year as we kick off 2022. A few major stories today. First, Dr. Robert Malone was on the Joe Rogan podcast the other day, and it was a very interesting interview, about 3 hours or so long, all about his Twitter ban. He was recently banned from Twitter for quote unquote disinformation, or let's say harmful information, and really sort of comprehensive podcast. Definitely worth checking out the episode. Update: it has just gotten removed from YouTube, I think, as of January the 1st. And a couple of things that he mentioned in there that I thought were really worth highlighting. First of all, is this Trusted News Initiative. So he talks about that because Joe Rogan, he's asking him about sort of like, how is all this information like regarding the COOF being suppressed, and Dr. Malone actually highlights this TNI network as being one of many facets within that. This was started back in 2019, and a lot of the major sort of corporate legacy media networks here joined forces in order to really suppress certain pieces of information that they didn't like. And very interesting topic. He also hit on this something called the Great Barrington Declaration. Effectively, a number of scientists, epidemiologists on infectious disease, they came together and they said, "Hey, these lockdowns are of grave concern to the physical and mental well-being of the population. It's actually going to cause more harm than good." You can read all about that on their website here in terms of, why that was written, what the intended audience was, who was involved with that, and it was actually co-signed by a number of individuals within the sort of science community as well. I don't think it had any let's say material impact. I think the decision makers in public health went their own direction, as we clearly see by the current state of events. But nonetheless, these individuals joined forces and took a stand for an anti-lockdown approach, being against lockdowns. In addition to that, he also talked quite a bit about CDC's corruption, and that actually goes hand in hand with this because, regardless of what dissenters and informed dissenters might say, the CDC has really trotted its own course, and he really railed very hard against the government and the administration, and really just the malfeasance and even the malpractice of the individuals who run the show. The Dr. Malone also touched on some Israel mortality rates. So Israel being a very specific case study, comparing the mortality rates of Israel to the Palestinian territories that surround it. Israel is, of course, highly vaxxed. The Palestinian territories, not so much. And he was actually pointing out that, according to the data, it's actually a higher mortality rate in Israel. He also touched on something that's been trending on Twitter lately, which is mass formation psychosis. And really, my understanding of that is effectively groupthink. At an enormous level, groupthink can happen sort of at a small level. Let's say in a room, you walk into a room, you just behave according to the room. But when it gets to the societal level and actually sort of comparing it to 1920s, 1930s Germany, really bad stuff can happen. Follow the leader, blindly, right? And this real emotional attachment to kind of following the crowd, regardless of the circumstances. Dr. Malone also hit quite a bit on sort of the suppression of information. And I thought there was one really relevant story on that. So what happened is Grabian Media, they recently got suspended on Twitter as well, just like Dr. Malone, because they actually quoted, or let's say took a statement from Representative Biggs in Congress, basically criticizing Big Pharma and saying, they won't consider therapeutics, and this is due to economic interest. Because of that, they were taken off of Twitter. And so what Dr. Malone is saying, if you just connect the dots here, it was kind of a timely, related story. Is this is exactly what is happening? The suppression of information that can cause sort of vaccine hesitancy, or can cause individuals to ask questions that people in power do not want to answer. And this has been happening since the beginning of this whole pandemic scenario. Really, I think Dr. Malone almost calls it like, or at least implies and suggests that it's really to the point of just rogue criminality at this point. And just absolute outlandishness, in total and full opposition against all science and medical ethics whatsoever. That's really what he spent some time going in on, and criticizing sort of the establishment, if you would, on. He also talked a little bit about protecting the kids, as sort of being the kind of the next frontier for folks to really protect. And so he actually touched on the fact that they are trying to push this sort of coof vaccine, not just to adults, but also to children to the extent possible, and some of the motivations around that. This story from Los Angeles seems to really correlate with that, because there's actually a doctor who I guess got actually fired from his job, for basically speaking out against what he said was illegally vaccinating students. Ironically, he was actually the director of ethics within the actual school district. And so within the California, or Cal Irvine is the name of the school. Very, very troubling story. And if you look at his original post on Twitter, the doctor actually sums it up as follows: Los Angeles Unified School District is vaccinating children without parental consent. They send your kid home with a form, and when the kid comes back to school, whether or not the form is signed, they consider the child's presence as at school consent, right? So if they just come back with the form, signed or unsigned, the school district was considering it to be consent from the parent. He continues along saying, this is gross abuse and a violation of state law and basic principles of medical ethics, disproportionately impacting ethnic minorities. And school authorities who are pulling these stunts are now on notice. The public is aware. So really salient and timely information related to the Dr. Malone story, about how all over the country, but LA is really a prime example. They're offering kids, ice cream and pizza and all these different things in order to get them jabbed up, and doing it behind their parents' backs, and finding nice workarounds to be able to do that, to the surprise of parents later on who get upset by that situation. And it's interesting because we're at a point now where one wonders how long the public will stand for this kind of stuff. I think we've gotten to a point, and maybe it's just me, maybe this is hopium and wishful thinking, but it seems as if we've gotten to, or we're getting to a point now where in these major cities, people who are fairly normal, and fairly tolerant, and feel as if they've been putting up with a lot this entire pandemic, they're actually starting to lose their patience, right? So if you remember Joe Biden's speech a few months ago saying, we are losing our patience. We're losing our patience. I think the same is happening at the individual sort of local level here. And so a few weeks back, actually, Mayor Wu, who's the mayor of Boston, she basically made an announcement, as you can see here, saying that on January the 15th, you'll need the Vax passport to basically enter a bunch of indoor establishments in Boston. And if you watch this video sometime, I mean, it's literally about 16 minutes long. It's not too much to go from the official's mouth, just empty words. But the one thing that's quite compelling is they're getting booed and heckled relentlessly. I mean, and extraordinarily audibly. I mean, it's almost like football or kind of a sports stadium level of noise in the background. So extraordinarily unpopular. And there's some good comments down here at the bottom around, um, how ludicrous all this is, and how these people claim to be sort of in tune with the people and listening to the people while the people actually boo them to their faces. So we'll see how things develop. Overall, I think this Dr. Malone interview is clearly an S tier story. Um, there is it's an amazing podcast. I mean, to the point that there's actually significant replay value time and time again, because he doesn't just stick to one topic. They just cover the board here, and he's also very cautious. Like, if someone was a conspiracy theorist or kind of a wacko, typically they will want to make all sorts of allegations, right, and say, here is a conclusion, here is a conclusion, here is a conclusion, don't you think this? He's actually quite reserved, and Joe spends a lot of at least the first half or so, maybe more, trying to make him jump to conclusions. And but Malone is very, let's say, reserved. He just is giving the information and allowing folks to react to it and make their own decisions. So very, very kind of tactful approach there. Definitely worth listening to, and hopefully that the things that he's talking about here will wake people up. Okay, so moving on to a kind of on a lighter note, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was recently pictured dining maskless in Miami, as a certain Kook variant cases soar, and this has gotten a lot of buzz. I don't want to spend too much time on this, because, to be honest, I think it's getting a little overhyped. But it's really showing the hypocrisy of the left, and the hypocrisy of our Democratic establishment, to criticize folks like Ron DeSantis and people in Florida, and at the same time go there. I think Don Lemon was also seen in Florida. All these sort of powerhouses who cheer and clap in favor of lockdowns go to places when they want to have fun that are lockdown free, so they can have good quality of life with their loved ones. And it's just pure hypocrisy, and actually kind of reminds of the criticism that she herself, AOC, gave to Ted Cruz when his state was going through a storm and he was out in, I think, Cancun with his family. And what kind of takes this to the next level in just a weird way is it kind of spirals in a strange direction, because the one of Trump's sort of let's say supporters, he actually, for some reason, oddly criticizes AOC's boyfriend's feet and sandal wear, which was really stupid. I think it's Steve Cortez, and that gave AOC a weird angle to basically say, "Oh, you want me, don't you?" Which is a hell of a take, if I can say so myself. So I think there's just some strange, almost psychosis, neurotic sociopathy in this person's brain that just kind of won't go away. Anything for political points, anything for I'm a victim, and she kind of spun it in her favor and turned the tables on Cortez there to to make him look like he was a bad person. Do you need logic to make these leaps? No. But you can make them, and it turns the table on your opponent. And let's keep in mind, this is the same AOC who basically did not, as far as we know, help her grandmother last summer when her home was hit by a hurricane in Puerto Rico. And she even denied money that was raised by some conservatives, Matt Walsh in particular, to help her mother. Because why? Excuse me, her grandmother. Why? Because her grandmother is more useful as a political pawn to score political points, than for actually helping and loving and caring for or inviting into her one of her many sort of residences. I think she has at least 2 apartments and drives a nice car. So pure hypocrisy. I think this person would sell her soul, and if she had one, potentially even her child, to get some likes and clicks and to sort of clap back against her opponents. So real trash bag of a human being, to be honest, or at least in my opinion. And I think this has been overhyped. And I'm actually going to move this probably to the D tier in terms of kind of materiality, if you would. Why? Because in my opinion, lefties do this all the time. The Democrats do this, like Nancy Pelosi, getting a haircut. You have Gretchen Whitmer, right? Disobeying her own rules. You have the mayor of um, Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, right? Rules for thee and not for me. Nothing new here. But I will say she kind of AOC seems to have taken it to new lows, because she even criticized Ron DeSantis, who we learned has actually been out of pocket because he's caring for his cancer-stricken wife. So just a scumbag of a human being, because she actually criticizes Ron while she's enjoying the niceties of his state, criticizing him for being sort of quiet since I think December the 20th. Not sure which world she lives in, but basically a holiday break. A lot of people are taking some time off, taking needless shots at a husband whose wife is going through it. Doesn't seem like a class act, but neither is she. So I'm moving that to the D tier and moving on. One story that I think is actually more important is actually the New York City mayor. On his first day in office, he actually is headed to work, apparently, to the office. And as he's waiting for the train, because I guess there's a custom of him taking the subway, he sees 3 guys fighting outside of the subway station. And so he calls the police. I think there's hope here. You see Batya Anger commenting on this. I think there's hope that this current mayor will be tougher on crime, right? He will actually, as a former policeman himself, take a stand against crime and bring back some of the let's say more heavy-handed and kind of tough approaches of the past that were pretty effective actually in reducing crime. And so I'm actually going to give him some kudos for making this call and taking some time out of his day, assuming this wasn't staged and is not an inside job or an op. It just goes to show how crime-ridden New York City has become for this to happen on his very first day of the year. And I will say there was some on the right who were saying, oh, he should have sent his personal security detail to do something about it, to I'll just let this play just for a moment as it's happening outside. He should have, sent his folks down there to stop it in person. I don't know about that. Maybe Curtis Silva, that's something that he would have done, knowing his character. But Curtis basically lost the mayorship to Mayor Adams. But that's a very tricky situation. I don't know if that was the wisest decision for him to send a security detail, and better for him potentially just to call it in here, and hopefully everything turned out okay. The reason I think this is even more pressing now is so a New York City cop was just sleeping in his car outside of a Harlem precinct and got shot in the head, which is just a crazy story. Again, on the very first day of the year. So this was on early Saturday morning, working a sort of a double graveyard shift, it seems. It turns out he's okay, thankfully. He is, was treated and seems to be like not have sustained life-threatening injuries. But I can't help but just think about this sort of uptick in crime recently, and the mayor's former promise back in November, after he did win the mayorship, that within his first 100 days, he would reestablish the NYPD plainclothes unit and focus on crime. So, maybe this is all a sign. Maybe it's an omen of things to come. But when one of your cops is shot in the head on your first day of work, and then you see three men fighting in the street and brawling it out, and you call them to do something about it, I don't know. Maybe the stars are aligning to tell you something is very wrong with your city, and something should be done about it. And so we'll see if he actually lives up to this promise or not. But I think it's going to be a sort of an interesting and meaningful situation to monitor over the next 100 days. I think that New Yorkers, if I were to guess, yeah, I'm not a New Yorker, but if I were to guess, I think that from what I'm seeing online and just reading about, folks they've reluctantly come in a lot of these blue cities really to accept this sort of vax mandate, papers please society. I'll wear my mask, etc. There's some that are taking a stand against it, but I think the bar for Mayor Adams is, as the person who sort of ran as a moderate and former police officer, is at minimum, don't screw up the city more than it's already screwed up, and nip crime in the bud. If he does almost nothing else, like if he just basically keeps most of de Blasio's, programs and institutions and policies and such in place, with maybe very slight modifications, even around, the coup response, and he's simply tough on crime and doesn't screw things up worse than they already are. Like, he has a very low bar to fill because people hated de Blasio, from what I hear, left and right. He was not liked in New York City. And so, if he just, like, the bar is low. Okay. They're big shoes, but your predecessor had very small feet, apparently. So if you just have slightly bigger feet to fill these large shoes, I think people will be happy. Thanks for listening to today's rundown. If you liked what you heard, please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.